Okay, thank you. So, like I said, I'm happy to be here. This is the second year that I am sharing our research at the EOCON conference. So, it's almost like something I look forward to every year now. Um, if you were here last year, I shared about our study on enterprise security in Cameroon, and building on that, during the time I was sharing that, we were actually working on this research that I'm about to share today. And we used our understanding of Cameroon and decided to broaden the scope and looked at West Africa and Central Africa. So our thinking was really those regions in Africa where Cameroon really relates to very closely. So we wanted to understand what what how cybersecurity is going on in this region. And just to introduce GFONA, what we do, our objective really is to build a database of the state of cybersecurity in Africa. And second is to provide information that would help decision making in policy decision making. And finally, really to trigger revisions of policies if they exist based on facts. So we don't want policies to be made based on feelings or hearsay. So we want it to be based on facts. So this is why we did this research in partnership with F5. So we'll go straight into it. My plan for today is really three, excluding the question and answer. So I will look at the research questions which we did ask those companies in Western Central Africa, and I will just quickly talk on our approach and then focus on what we actually learned from the study. I understand we are a bit late today, so I'll try to go as fast as I can so that we catch up a bit on time. So the research question, as we know, digitization and the use of information and communication technologies is being used to solve many challenges in Africa currently. You want to think about financial inclusion or whatever, everything, it's almost ICTs that are at the forefront of that solution. So with this comes numerous security threats and risk. Our challenge is that there's various stakeholders implementing these solutions do not completely understand or well perceive these security threats. So we want to study them and present facts to stakeholders. And so based on these, we thought we'll ask companies, organizations, not just private companies, but both public and private. And we'll see in my next slide, the organizations that were covered. We asked them in these three broad questions. There were specific questions within these broad categories, but we asked them three broad categories: which technologies they are adopting or plan to adopt in their digital transformation journey. Are they adopting new trends in application development? And if so or not, what application security readiness looks like in the region? So these are the three main research questions we were trying to answer. The approach we used in this was a survey-based research, and we did some both online and physical interviews in 5 countries: Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. And our targets in these organizations were senior technical staff members and decision makers, so the executives of the organizations. And almost every sector was covered. There were financial services, manufacturing, mining, energy, education, even government, technology, health, and agriculture. So everything, we got responses from almost every industry. So we believe this really represents the organizations. In terms of what we learned, to start with, um, in those areas that I mentioned earlier, we asked specific questions. And first, we wanted to know if organizations plan to have or start digital transformation at all, moving from manual to digital, paper to digital. So we wanted to know. And as you can see, there was a resounding yes from organizations saying we certainly have a digital transformation project going on, up to 67%. And then we wanted to know, if so, what, I think I should move this, sorry, blocking that. So if so, what do they think will be strategically important for them in their digital transformation journey in the next 2 to 5 years? And the majority said cloud computing. Good, because if we know this, then we know what sort of security threats will be coming to the region or already exist. So that's why we're asking these questions, to understand where they are going to. And then we also were interested in knowing how digital transformation is influencing application decisions in these organizations. And based on the responses we received, it was clear that digital transformation is changing how organizations are actually beginning to develop applications. So, for example, uh, application development was becoming more agile. I guess that's not surprising in 2022. And also using more automation, which is a good thing. It tells us that at least the region is catching up with the rest of the world, and it even if not now, it's planning to catch up or do things like the rest of the world is doing in 2 to 5 years' time. Now, having understood that from that perspective, we then wanted to know which infrastructure they use to host these applications, or plan to use to host these applications. Oh, sorry, but I think someone's mic was on. All right. So what we noticed was that virtual machines were the thing today. That was the thing. It was VMs. Some did say they use containers, containerization, but that was really very few. So virtual machines were still the thing to deploy applications. However, we wanted to know, yeah, so you say virtual machines. Thanks, sorry again for that disruption. So we also wanted to know if they mentioned that they wanted to go cloud as the strategic decision. So what then, how do they choose this if they were to choose a software as a service application? And they said best in class, as you can see on the graph there. The majority said they'll go for best in class. And that was interesting because the next question was, so if you're going for best in class software, software as a service software, then how do you choose the cloud provider? And we were expecting it to be sort of in the same line of best in class as well, or the best one. But interestingly, we got responses from the majority saying we do that on a case by case basis. And that we thought was interesting, because we were expecting that it will also align with how they choose the software, but that was not the case. And there were many other instances where there was a bit of a conflicting response as well, and we'll see a bit of that later. But when we now narrowed on application security itself, and it starts getting a bit interesting, we ask what to tell us what is the most characteristic they will look for when they are weighing which cloud offering to use. And they said that characteristic would be security. As you can see on the graph, security was the main concern for companies. And we thought this was good, especially because our next question was got us a bit concerned. Um, Despite the fact that most companies or organizations said phishing and web application attacks sit at the top of their list of the kind of attacks they get, we nonetheless noticed that 26% of attacks were ransomware attacks. And this is very serious, as we know today, that ransomware is very rampant in the world, and many companies are falling for this. So we wanted to make sure that understand rather, that if companies are going to the cloud or going to choose a cloud provider, they should be thinking security as a key issue for them. So it was good to know that security was the primary concern. And I just wanted to highlight that ransomware is quite serious too in Western Central Africa. I know most of what we hear in the news is in the West, but as you can see, 26 companies said 26% of their attacks are ransomware attacks. So this is something that was good information for us, because then it means that things like cybersecurity insurance are very critical or important for the region as well, if ransomware attacks are really that many. All right, I'll move on. The other thing we noticed in in the data we received was that, except for Nigeria, where organizations were confident in their ability to withstand applications level security attacks, both in the private cloud and in public cloud. In all other countries in the region, they said they were only confident if the attack was, they could plan for the attack only if they were using a private cloud. So that tells you a lot, that the trust level of companies of public clouds. They don't really trust public clouds. They would rather be using a private cloud if they had an option. And the final one was an interesting question, or the data we received was interesting for us because two similar questions got two different answers. And the first is we asked the question, do you believe you have a security skills gap in your organization? And the majority said no, we don't have a security skill gap. We are prepared, we have the skills and everything. But then we switched the question around and say and asked which area do you have a security gap or deficit in skills in your organization? And many said we don't know. So that was quite interesting for us because if you don't know whether you have security gap, how then can you confidently, or if you don't know where you have a security gap or deficit, how can you confidently say you do not have any security gap, skills gap? I would have expected that they would say none, but that was not the case. But also, as you can see on the graph on the right, there were many other skills that companies said that they didn't have enough skills in. You can see public cloud, application security, multi-cloud, DevOps, network security, and stuff, endpoint security, and stuff like that. So that was very interesting for us because we thought those were conflicting responses. But it just goes to show you that the many leaders of these organizations do not know their workforce very well. Then they do not know where they stand from a cybersecurity perspective very well either. So I'm sure, or I suspect that they they were making assumptions on how safe they are, not what is actually on the ground. And that is all I had. So happy to take any questions, and I'll drop the link to download the report or in chat as well. Thanks.